If you stripped modern survival advice down to its bones and compared it to how humans actually stayed alive while moving through hostile terrain for thousands of years, you'd notice something unsettling. Ancient travelers crossed deserts, forests, frozen passes, an open steppe with no GPS, no synthetic insulation, no resupply drops, and no emergency services. Yet many of them survived conditions that overwhelm modern hikers and soldiers equipped with far more gear. They didn't do it through toughness alone. They relied on one survival habit so fundamental that it shaped how they moved, rested, planned, and stayed alive. And it's a habit we've almost completely abandoned. That habit was disciplined, deliberate stopping. Not rest when exhausted, not collapsing at night, but intentionally stopping early, often, and predictably, before the environment forced it. Our modern survival culture obsesses over movement, cover ground, push through, make miles. Ancient travelers understood the opposite truth. Survival depended on knowing when to stop while you still had margin. Why ancient travel was built around stopping, not distance. Ancient road systems, trade routes, pilgrimage paths, and nomadic corridors were not designed around speed. They were designed around survivability. Caravan routes across North Africa and the Middle East were structured by wells, shade, and defensible rest points. Roman roads were spaced by mansio and mutationes, official stopping places, roughly a day's walk apart, not because that was the maximum distance, but because it was the safest distance. In colder climates, Arctic and subarctic travelers operated the same way. Inuit movement was dictated by known shelter locations, windbreaks, snow conditions, and daylight windows. They did not push on into uncertainty. Instead, they stopped while conditions were still manageable and built safety into the rhythm of movement. Stopping early conserved energy, protected morale, prevented injury, and allowed time for repair of gear, of bodies, and of plans. The survival math ancient travelers understood intuitively. Ancient travelers didn't think in terms of calories burned per mile or VO2 max, but they understood risk accumulation. Every hour of movement increased exposure. Every mile added wear to feet, joints, and equipment. Fatigue made navigation errors more likely. Dehydration made bad decisions inevitable. Stopping early reduced compounding risk. It allowed people to eat before hunger became weakness, to hydrate before thirst turned into confusion, and to set shelter before light or weather vanished. Modern travelers often stop when forced to. Ancient travelers stopped while they still had options. That difference is everything. How deliberate stopping prevented emergencies before they started. Most survival emergencies are not sudden, they're progressive. Hypothermia, heat exhaustion, dehydration, injury, navigational error, all build gradually. Ancient travelers recognized early warning signs because stopping gave them time to notice them. Feet were inspected daily, clothing was adjusted before sweat became dangerous, loads were redistributed, weather was observed, not reacted to, routes were reconsidered. Stopping created space for thinking. A Roman legion on the march did not walk until collapse. Camps were constructed every evening with ritual precision. Ditches dug, fires placed, security established. This wasn't bureaucracy, it was survival discipline. You know, a tired unit with a secure camp actually survived storms, ambushes, and sickness far better than a faster unit without structure. So why did modern culture abandon this habit? Well, industrialization rewired how we think about movement. Trains, vehicles, and aircraft collapsed to distance, and speed just became normal. Stopping, on the other hand, became inefficiency. Even in outdoor recreation these days, success is measured by miles completed, peaks bagged, and days shaved off routes. Survival advice followed suit. Push through discomfort. Keep moving to stay warm. Make distance before nightfall. These ideas are situationally true, but honestly, they can be dangerous when applied as default behavior. Modern gear reinforces the illusion. Synthetic insulation forgives poor timing. Headlamps extend movement into darkness. GPS masks, navigational fatigue. But when any of those fail, or, conditions exceed design limits, the absence of deliberate stopping becomes lethal. How ancient travelers practiced stopping in real terms. This wasn't laziness or fear, it was structured habit. Travelers established fixed stopping windows, not flexible ones. If they hadn't reached a known shelter or suitable site by a certain time, they stopped and made camp where they were. They prioritized defensibility, wind protection, and access to water over making progress. They also stopped when conditions shifted, not when conditions collapsed. Rising wind, changing cloud behavior, altered animal movement, these were cues to halt. Waiting was not failure, it was strategy. Crucially, stopping included active work. Shelter improvement, fire preparation, tool maintenance, food processing, and planning happened while energy was still available. Applying this habit today, well, it means not romanticizing the past. You don't need to abandon modern gear to relearn this habit. What you really need is to change how you decide when to stop. Set a hard stop time that ignores how close you are to your goal. Build camps early enough that you can actually improve them. Eat and hydrate before you feel the need. And treat stopping as part of movement, not the end of it. On a hike, this might mean stopping with 2 hours of daylight left, instead of chasing just 1 more mile. In winter, it might mean halting before sweat accumulates. And in heat, it means stopping in shade long before exhaustion appears. The habit isn't about fear, it's about margin. Ancient travelers survived because they protected margin relentlessly. Why this habit matters more than any piece of gear. Gear can fail, strength can fade, plans can change. The habit of stopping early preserves decision-making capacity, which is, honestly, the single most important survival resource. When you stop deliberately, you stay ahead of the environment instead of reacting to it. That's why this habit quietly kept people alive for millennia, and why its absence underlies so many modern survival failures. If this kind of historically grounded survival thinking matters to you, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, share this with someone who thinks survival is about pushing harder, and keep these lessons alive. The past still has a lot to teach, if we're willing to stop long enough to listen